don't care what anyone else thinks of you. Get clear on your thoughts around giving a concern about what anyone else thinks, because that will create fear in your life and that will keep you small. What anyone else thinks has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with them. I mean, if there's someone in your life who has exactly the career path that you want, and you want to go to them for guidance or advice specifically around who to be as this type of a business person, that's one thing. But to start up a business and like go to your friends for thoughts on it and have them all tell you that it's not a good idea or it stinks or this, that, or the other thing, like unless they have what you want or they have experience in this area, just don't even go to them. I mean, really, I would disregard it.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several businesses to 7 and 8 figures, 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have another great guest on the podcast, Ryan Stanley. And just to give you a little bit of background on Ryan, so Ryan started out his career originally in multi-level marketing. No, don't hate him because of that. He's not in it anymore. Started out at 19, worked for his dad at a daycare center for a while, then jumped over to his brother's title company, did a few things in between, started working in the music industry, helping out artists, got tired of working with shady club owners and musicians that were hard to work for, and now he's moved over to being a certified professional coach, helping a lot of people still in the music industry. So welcome to the podcast. And does that intro give you justice?
Yeah, it's definitely the gist. I'm really, really happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me, Devin.
Thank you for coming on. So now I gave everybody the gist. Well, let's have you dive in and tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been really in some capacity, I think, an entrepreneur. Like to your point, even at 18, 19 years old, stepping into like some sort of owning business and on like an MLM type of a space. But, you know, through that experience, I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I learned what it was like to kind of go through some ups and downs of even starting any type of a business as a young person. After that, I did own a daycare center with my father and then helped my brother a little bit in his own business as well. But in 2008, I was working in artist management. So I was managing a bunch of bands and it was my own business from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And what I loved most about it was helping people and empowering people and inspiring people. And especially working with creative musicians, there's a lot of people in that space who are not only are they not supported or empowered to be successful, but they're often, belittled for wanting to be successful in an industry that could be considered difficult. They're just not.
Ask one very tangential question, but an interesting question nonetheless, at least to me. So any artists that we would recognize or know, or what were the most famous artists you worked with, or what would be somebody that they should check out that you helped out with?
So I would say the most famous band was, it's actually kind of a B level famous, but it's there's a band called Phish, which is, I hope you're familiar with, PHISH, out of Vermont. They're a popular jam band. And they have a lyricist, a guy by the name of Tom Marshall, and he had started a side band called Amphibian, and it's spelled with an F. And he had a guitarist and a guy named Anthony Kryzan, who was in a band called the Spin Doctors. And so I managed them as they released their last album. Another band that you may not have heard of, but if you're into progressive rock, there's a band called Karmic Juggernaut that I worked with for a long time. And they are extremely talented, really, really, really cool guys. I also worked with a woman named Cece Coletti. And she's kind of a classic rock type of style, but she's worked with Meatloaf. She was a backup singer for Meatloaf for a while, and so bits and pieces, kind of on the outskirts. And a lot of other up and coming bands, just kind of getting them into the New York scene. And then there's another band called CB Radio, which has been on Sirius XM Country a lot of different times, and so I managed them for a little bit as well. So all over the gamut, but not necessarily household names, to say the least.
Oh, fair enough. Hey, I was just curious, and maybe some of the listener audience have heard of the bands and enjoyed them, and now have even more respect that you have more authority with them. But anyway,
absolutely.
So you managed the bands for a while, and I think that you say, enjoyed the aspect of, to coach them, help them to grow, help them to understand, within the management, still like that area. But then you also mentioned that you kind of adjusted or shifted from purely being kind of the band manager or doing that to more what you're doing or professional coaching. And maybe dive in a little bit as to, how did you go, or what prompted that transition? How did that transition go? And, what made you decide to jump over and adjust things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at that point, like I said, I recognized what I loved about it. I knew what I loved about it. In October of 2008, probably 3, if not 4 different times during the month, a conversation around coaching showed up for me. Like somebody somewhere said something about being a coach, and whether it was a life coach or an executive coach or a business coach. And I was like, well, that's what I do. That's what I want to do. That's who I am. I love coaching people to be the best versions of themselves. And so I was certified as a professional coach in 2009. And for the first 5 or 6 years, I coached really specifically musicians because
I'm going to ask one question that's probably
yeah, please.
What is this? How do you get certified as a coach, or what does a certified coach mean?
Yeah, that's not a dumb question at all. It's a great question. So there is and in fact, anybody out there who's either considering A, being a coach, or B, hiring a coach, there's some definitely important things to look at when, certification is something to be thinking of. So first of all, I wouldn't work with anybody who wasn't certified. That's my general rule of thumb, because coaching, a lot of people think what they're doing is coaching, but it's not coaching. It's often mentoring. It's often consulting. It's often telling people what to do based on their life experience. And coaching is not that. Coaching is really, it's really recognizing that people have the answers within. They're just blocked by their fears, and they're blocked by their limiting beliefs, and they're blocked by their past experiences. So wherever you go, if you're going to go with a coach or you want to be trained as a coach, I recommend going with either someone or getting trained in an organization that is recognized as what's called an ACTP, or an accredited coach training program. And that's through the ICF, or the International Coaching Federation. So the ICF is a governing board. They certify individuals, and they also credential organizations. And so to be certified, so IPEC is the school that I was trained through, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. They've been around since 1999. They've been an ACTP since 2001. So basically, to be certified, I mean, there can be people out there who have no credentialing, or, there can be training organizations that are basically just saying, hey, I'm a cool guy, I'm a good coach, I'm going to train you to be a coach. And they might have their own certification. But if that's not recognized by the ICF, I would dig a little bit deeper and find out what other qualifications really make them outstanding to you if you're looking for a coach. So for me, credentialing, it's important to be done through the International Coaching Federation. And then
one last question on that. So what is a certification entail, or how do you get certified? Is it a 1-week course so that I get a bill, a diploma? Is it 5 years and I'm as much as graduate school? Is it somewhere in between, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the place that you get trained. So for me at IPEC, it's a 9-month program, and it's you're working 5 to 10 hours a week, and so there's a couple different certifications involved. But there's some places, like if they're going to say, hey, if you can just attend this weekend and you're a certified coach, then for me that's a sign, right? You you do want to put in some time. You do want, and again, I mentioned IPEC is a great example. They've been around for over 20 years right now, so you want somebody with some sort of credibility. I definitely recommend doing your research. But 2 things. One, the certification that I got through IPEC, the CPC, which is Certified Professional Coach, that is their certification, right? They are an ACTP, and that is their certification. So I was certified by IPEC, so I have a CPC. If I additionally want to be credentialed by the ICF itself, the International Coaching Federation, I can go to them and say just that, like, hey, I just graduated IPEC. Here's my CPC. I'd like to also be credentialed by you. They say, awesome, because you went to an ACTP, recognized by us already, you're basically 85% of the way there. So they just want to then see you have a certain amount of coaching hours. They want you to take an exam by them. I think there's one other requirement they have for you. So then at that point, though, once you show them, let's say 100 hours or something like that, you can show them that you can get their credential, which is called an ACC, or Associate Certified Coach. And that's recognized all over the world, no matter which training school you go to, right? So the ACC, and then once you get 500 hours, you'd be a PCC, or Professional Certified Coach. And when you get 2,500 hours, you'd be an MCC, or Master Certified Coach. So those are kind of like across the industry recognized by, because it's the ICF. But the individual organizations will have their own certifications.
All right, fair enough. And it was a tangent or a side. It's just, a little bit kind of like when people are, when you hear an attorney and what does it mean to take the bar exam, or, bar certified, or those type of things. Sometimes it's terms that people hear a lot, but don't necessarily.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question, because there's a lot of people out there that are going to say, no, we're credentialed. We're credentialed by our sister company, which is the credential. You know what I mean? So people are actually certifying themselves as organizations. And so that's not the direction you want to go. You want to go to a place. Go ahead.
No, I said that would be nice if I could do that. If people did that with legal, and hey, it's my law firm certified myself as an attorney.
Right.
We're good to go.
Right.
All right. So now continuing forward. So you got certified. You said, hey, what I really like is doing kind of more of the coaching and helping people in the music industry and that
Yeah.
industry with coaching. So how did you start to make that transition? You get certified. Was it a smooth transition? Did you just the clients you had before that you're managing, now you're coaching? Did you have to start the business over? Was there highs and lows, or how did that transition go for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So I did have to, because it was a shift and I was doing something different and the bands that I was working with still needed a manager. I thought it was easier just to kind of cut things off. Right. I kept one of my clients and the rest I just moved directly to new clients for coaching. Interestingly enough, as I was going through the training at IPEC, before I even graduated, they actually asked me to come work for them. And so I spent some time there. I helped them with marketing. This was back in 2008, 2009. And they didn't really, not everybody was into social media just yet. Nobody had figured it out. There wasn't as many opportunities as there are. And coming from the music industry, MySpace was actually created to help fans connect with their bands and bands connect with their fans. So I've been doing the social media thing for a while. And so I initially came in and helped them with their social media, helped out with some marketing. I also did some sales for them. But then I was also the internal coach for them. So this is the organization that trains people to become coaches, and they hired me as their internal coach. So I coached their staff. I coached entry level up to the CEO. And so with this, I was able to kind of start my own business. I also have a t-shirt company, which is for the music industry. I had my own coaching practice, but I also helped them quite a bit.
So when you made that kind of that leap, and it sounds like for the most part, you had to shift your clients over. It was a different, you're offering different services than what you previously had. And so they were also needing a manager. Was that scary? Was it a good transition? Because, a lot of times when you get into shifting what you're doing career wise, shifting what, how you're approaching things, it can be scary to leave your previous career or clients that you put a lot of time and money and effort to build a clientele. And so was that, was it scary? Was it a smooth transition, or how did that go?
Yeah, of course. No, it's definitely scary at some point, but I also really believe that if you're doing what you love every day, and I wasn't feeling time being stressed about what I didn't love and having all these extra things that were just more of annoying than anything, there's a peace of mind quality, right? There's a thing of saying, okay, listen, I know that I'm really good at this. I know that I love what I do, and I know that I'll attract the right clients. Doesn't mean that it's easy and it happens overnight. Like I said, I was kind of blessed to have a concurring role suddenly offered to me at this other coach training organization as well as I built my business. So it wasn't that it wasn't scary, but going through this training where you're learning to help others recognize fears and blocks and limiting beliefs, you start recognizing the same things in yourself. So while there were certainly legitimate and valid fears, I was also trained at the same time to be coaching myself around how I'd rather be feeling and how I'd rather be stepping into my day and how I'd rather show up as an entrepreneur and as a business person. And I think when we start to create gratitude for the outcome that we want, and we start thinking about the blessings that we have, and we start connecting people with the genuine intention to serve and not just to take their money, right? I was there to serve each and every one of my clients. Doors open up and people are attracted to you, and the right people are attracted to you. Now, all that being I was about to say was all that being said is like, so about 5 or 6 years in, as I was also being this internal coach for this large organization, I recognized that I had a larger skill to work with others, not just musicians, because I was coaching the CEO. I was coaching, people in all walks of life at the organization. And so I started working with doctors. I started working with authors. I started working with people in marketing. I've worked with people in all walks of life. Really, once you start, the fact I started stepping into helping people realize that there was a better version of themselves. It's not that there was a different version. It was their true self. It was just covered by fears and blocks and limiting beliefs. And what I do isn't necessarily, people often say, Ryan, well, I know what you do. Like your product is coaching. Well, my product actually isn't coaching. That's what I do. But my product is clarity. It's efficiency. It's accountability. It's forward momentum. It's joy. It's freedom. It's self-awareness. And when you can help people bring all this out from within themselves on a daily basis, it's worth the fear and it's worth the overwhelm, and it's an exciting place to be.
No, makes perfect sense. So now I'm going to continue on your journey or shift gears slightly. So you have, I think, and I don't remember the exact time, we talked a little about, you have the coaching business you do now. You also have the t-shirt company, and then you have the company Teach Me to Sell, I think the training company, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So were all of those, in parallel? Which one did you start first, and how do you juggle your time? I know, and I'm asking you a loaded question.
That's okay.
Why did you start all those? How do you juggle all of them?
Totally. So I'm a bit of an ADD entrepreneur in general. Like, I mean, everybody, I actually honestly consider entrepreneurialism a form of art, an art form. I
Mm,
feel like, entrepreneurs start off with nothing, like a blank canvas, and they decide what they want to put on it. And they're willing to put in the time and the effort and be vulnerable and creative and put these different things out there for the world to see. Right. Um, and so entrepreneurship is no different. Right? It's very similar. And so I love to create different things. So the t-shirt company, it's called Set List Tees. And
mm,
so it's like a t-shirt company has a unique piece of art featuring the date from your favorite concert on the front. And on the back of the concert, they'll have a set list of whatever they played that night. And so
mm.
I started that in 2010. And that has just been, right now I've kind of got it up on an automatic flow, and I have an admin who works for me, and then she kind of runs a lot of the day-to-day stuff on there. But it's a great way. So to answer your question, I've run it for the past 10 years alongside it, just kind of on the side. It was more of a hobby. It was a great way for me to go to Fish concerts and sell t-shirts in the parking lot and meet a lot of people. And also the fact that each shirt has its own unique set list. It is its own story. It is its own ticket stub. It is an experience that people like to share and talk to each other about. So that's always just been congruent. The teachmetosell.com, really, I just started in March. So the timing, is just as soon as COVID kind of kicked into gear. So that's a newer company. And really what it was is I recognized in working with coaches and being in the coaching industry that there's so many of us who love to serve and want to connect with people and want to empower others, or, fitness instructors or consultants or anybody who's like here to serve. And then all of a sudden someone asks them how much they charge and they freak out and they get uncomfortable and they ask, they offer it for free or at too much of a discounted price because they're uncomfortable with the sales process.
Mm.
So teachmetosell.com is basically, it's there's an online course, but there's other products. We're just training people to be more, to sell less and serve more, get past the challenge of sales and realize that it's not a dirty word and that it doesn't have to be this slimy thing. And it can be something that's fulfilling and engaging and creative and comfortable and fun to connect with. And so that's been going on since March. And so between, authoring the book, doing the podcast I had of my own as well, coaching my clients, the t-shirt thing kind of runs itself. I kind of just check in with my admin once a week. And then obviously we haven't had any live music this summer to go to, but if those types of events come up, I will go to those as well. But really, I don't watch a ton of TV. My spare time, what I enjoy doing in my spare time is working on my business. It's fun. I think, it's creative and it's a way for me to kind of be myself.
And it's funny because I always get the same thing. When people ask me what my hobby is, my go-to answer is always like my hobby is startups, which is there's a lot of truth. Now I do have other hobbies and I like to read books and a few other things, but generally a lot of my hobby is startups and small businesses, and I enjoy that. My wife always laughs and says, "Hey, that's not much of a hobby. That's what you do all day for work anyway." So
Right.
And there's some truth to it, but I tend to enjoy it. So as you did that, and you started to touch on it, but juggling multiple businesses, and I get how do you decide where to put your time and effort on between the different businesses, right? In the sense you only have so much time in the day or time in the week, and oftentimes or the drawback can be, and I do the same thing, but I'm just curious how you do it, is sometimes you have multiple businesses, but some of them die on the vine, so to speak, because you don't give enough time and attention to focus on the one that either needs your most attention or is making you the most money or that is the most enjoyable or any of the above, and then the other ones don't. So how do you divide up your time, or how do you figure out how to juggle the different businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm sure a common theme for many of us who are in the ADD entrepreneur space.
Yeah.
I think first things first, and you're just going to recognize that you're not going to I'm not going to work a 40-hour 9-to-5 work week. Meaning some weeks I might work 40 hours, but they're going to be who knows what time and who knows what else I got going on, right? So it's going to be on weekends.
As the old line goes, the best thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to choose which 80 hours you work a week.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. So, so it's going to be weekends, it's going to be evenings. And so making time for that and organizing your time. For me, especially if I'm starting off in a new business, I will designate a specific day of the week towards that business, right? So I say, okay, so Tuesday's the day that I'm only going to work on setless tees. Monday's the day I do my coaching advertising. And that works well for me. If I work on something new each day or whatever day it is. So scheduling it out that way. So I've already determined when I start the day what I'm going to be working on. Then once the weekends come around, I'm more just kind of sit in front of my computer, whether it be on the deck or outside or whatever. Then I'm kind of picking and cleaning up bits and pieces from the week, like stuff that maybe emails and which could be done in a variety of different areas. The other piece of advice that I would give, and I don't know if this is advice or not, but something that has worked for me is finding people that can work with you in those areas. So for Teach Me to Sell, I've got a great partner, and his strengths are in actual sales training. My strength is in the mindset piece. So he's got, decade worth of sales training experience for $1 million, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, work in the financial industry. So knowing that I was bringing somebody in who had worked with other people, had worked in sales, had worked in their own business, to kind of handle some of the stuff that his strengths. And then when it comes down to the mindset piece, I can handle that as well. And also on the days when you're not getting enough done, to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, and to also motivate yourself when you're feeling like, okay, not enough is getting done, or I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, to have a partner to connect with and kind of bounce ideas off of, and also inspire. When we're able to inspire others, we accidentally inspire ourselves often, right? And and as I mentioned in my t-shirt company, I have somebody who does a lot of the admin work, because that's at the point where after 10 years, it can kind of run on its own. So I think knowing that your day doesn't have to be like anybody else's, you don't have to compare your life to a prior life. If you're starting an entrepreneur, decide what works best for you, and don't be afraid to ask for help, but don't be afraid to bring in people for help. Those are the two things that come to mind off the top.
No, that makes perfect sense. So now, one question that we hit on that I'm going to ask, aside from your journey, but where you're in the coaching and other people may find it interesting. So if you're either looking for a coach and or you have a coach approach you and say, hey, I think I can help you either to find better balance in your life, you can, find more enjoyment, I can help you be more efficient, or whatever type of coach you're looking for. What, aside from certification, what would be maybe some tips or highlights or other things that people should look for when selecting a coach, or when somebody approaches them, is to determine whether or not they need a coach?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would come down to, obviously, like we said, certification is a huge place. And I really would make sure that I would go with someone who was certified through an accredited coach training program. I'll say that again, just for importance. But the other piece to it, I think, is like, when you're coaching, when you're working with a coach, it is a pretty personal relationship. You do want to spend this hour or whatever it is on a weekly basis with somebody who you enjoy being with, because they're going to be the people that you go to on your tougher days. Doesn't mean they have to be all nice and lovey-dovey all the time, depending on the type of coach you're looking for. Some people need that kick in the butt. They need somebody to be a little bit more stern. But recognize clearly what you want your outcome to be, right? Why am I hiring a coach? And then do some research, and don't pick the first person you find. I would say typically I'd reach out to multiple, minimum of 3, and have a complimentary session with each one of those, and see how you feel at the end of each one. I think some people and every coach is going to be different. There's a lot of coaches out there who will have they're going to listen, here's our workbook, and you're going to do these activities each week. And at the end of this month, we're going to have this done. And that is awesome and works great for some people. I'm the opposite. I am more like, hey, what do you want to work on today? Like, who are you today? What happened over the past 7 days? A lot of the time we'll certainly have things set up in the coming week that I'll ask them to do, homework that they'll agree to take on. And sometimes we'll always reflect on it at the next meeting, but we're not necessarily going to then spend the whole hour talking about the homework that they just did. So I would do research. I would say, reach out to at least 3. I would say definitely get referrals as well. And then I would say ask for a complimentary session, and just spend at least a good hour with them, and then ask yourself some important questions afterwards. How did I feel at the end of this? And is this somebody that I would want to spend time with in one of my favorite social surroundings?
That's great advice. I think that certainly will be helpful as people are looking for and deciding if they need a coach or how to select a coach. Well, as we start to wrap up the podcast, I always ask 2 questions at the end of the podcast. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, what was the worst business decision you ever made?
The worst business decision I ever made was, again, it's funny, we already mentioned MySpace. Back in the days of MySpace, as a young man, I created a thing called RySpace. And it was MySpace, which was their tagline was a place for friends. This was RySpace, a place for Ryans. And I went and I created like a MySpace page that would only friend other Ryans. And so I had like a lot of Ryans on there, but I made this, okay, so now I'm going to start selling t-shirts. This was my first endeavor into t-shirts. And so I had these RySpace t-shirts made up. And of course they're like, well, listen, the more you buy, the cheaper they are. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to sell millions of these, obviously. And so I just spent a lot of money on a lot of t-shirts that I think I sold 2, maybe 3 altogether. In fact, I ended up donating them to a homeless shelter. So I always laugh at the idea of these homeless people walking around with RySpace t-shirts on.
Now I'm kind of excited to go find someone that has that t-shirt It just
Yeah.
maybe I'll have to start going to places, whether it's secondhand stores or somewhere where they're going to
Yeah.
circulate it. And if I ever see a Rye Space T-shirt, I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to come back and tell you I found one of your shirts.
I mean, literally, I think there was like 1,000 of them that I gave out. I had to like give out these giant like piles of T-shirts. On the front, it says Rye Space, a place for Ryans. On the back, it just like there was this whole argument in a fun way on the Rye Space page about how everybody's always calling us Brian and how Bryans are really out to get us. And so on the back, it just said F Brian, spread the word. The word is Ryan or something like that. And so
All right.
you'll know
Well,
it when you see it.
I like the business idea. I might just have to. I give you kudos, even if it didn't work out. I think it's a fun business idea. So
Yeah,
all right.
It was good.
So that was the worst business decision. So now we'll jump to the second question I always ask, which is, so you're talking to someone that's just getting into startups or small businesses. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, don't care what anyone else thinks of you. Get clear on your thoughts around giving a concern about what anyone else thinks, because that will create fear in your life and that will keep you small. What anyone else thinks has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with them. I mean, if there's someone in your life who has exactly the career path that you want and you want to go to them for guidance or advice specifically around who to be as this type of a business person, that's one thing. But to start up a business and like go to your friends for thoughts on it and have them all tell you that it's not a good idea or it stinks or this, that, or the other thing, like unless they have what you want or they have experience in this area, just don't even go to them. I mean, really, I would disregard it because people are going to tell you things based on their own fears and their own blocks and their own limiting beliefs and what their mom told them and what their dad told them and what their life is led to be. So step into your greatness because this is your life.
All right. Well, I think that's great advice as well. So I think that two good lessons learned and certainly things to people to keep in perspective. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to get to know you, they want to reach out, they want to use you as a coach, they want to get a part to buy one of your T-shirts, whether it's Rye Space or now the online T-shirt business, or they want to utilize it, anything else, all the above, what's the best way to connect or reach out with you?
Yeah, please. And thank you, by the way, for that opportunity. I really appreciate it, man. So you can go to ryanstanley.com. It's RyanStanley.com. I've got a book on there for sale as well, which gives you some insight as to who I am. The book is called Be Patient, Be Present, Be Joyful, a first aid kit for the emotional bumps, scrapes, and bruises of life. If you buy it on the website, you'll get a signed copy from me. And then depending on my availability, you also get a complimentary coaching session. And on there, you'll see social media buttons for Twitter, for Instagram, for Facebook. And so you can click on there and find me wherever you want. Quickly, I'll just also say the t-shirt company, it's called setlisttees.com. And then if you're interested in learning more about sales, if you are a service-oriented solopreneur and looking just for some insight in sales, you can go to teachmetosell.com as well.
Awesome. Well, there's plenty of ways to reach out to you and certainly encourage everybody, depending on what they need and how they want to reach out, to certainly reach out to you. So thank you again for coming on the podcast. For all of you that are listeners on the podcast, and if you have a great journey to tell, make sure to go to inventivejourneyguest.com. You're always welcome to apply to be on the podcast. And if you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you get a notification on this and all the new episodes coming out. And lastly, if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. We're always here to help. Thanks again for coming on the podcast, Ryan. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing how the journey continues to play out and all the people you're able to help.
Thanks, Devin. I love being here, and I appreciate your time.
Well, my pleasure.